Stories are promises we can't control. My name is Osadmebi, and every week I will tell you a short story written by a Nigerian writer or author. That's the long and short of it. So without much ado, this week's story is by Ozioma Ruth Nweke, and it's titled Bed 12. I still remember it as clear as daylight. I still remember the first time I saw life leave a human. It was a hot afternoon in the theater. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of blood, disinfectant, and spirit. Occasionally, thick cold air wafted across the room from the only functioning air conditioner in the theater. I was standing on one foot, hoping it will ease the pain in my legs. It's been several hours. Actually, it's been almost 23 hours and counting that I've been on duty. I guess doing a rotation in general surgery wasn't for the faint-hearted, but for some reason, I loved it. The urgency of the cases that came in, the adrenaline as everyone ran around to save a life. It kept me warm on a cold night, made me feel like I was a real doctor, a life-saving one. The sound of a rickety trolley making its way across the room pulled me out of my thoughts. I watched with keen interest as my chiefs, I said chiefs, that's what we call senior colleagues in the field of medicine. I watched as my chiefs sliced and burnt. I've always wondered and thought that a diathermy machine was an interesting tool used in surgery. The smell of burning flesh nauseated me though, but it was still interesting. The clock ticked slowly, and finally I could see we were almost nearing the end. My chiefs had begun an interesting conversation that lightened the mood in the room. I even cracked a smile. And you've probably heard that it is always when you assume the worst has already happened, that is when something you never imagined happens. Someone ran into the theater, I still can't remember who, to alert my chief that his patient, the one we had spent almost 8 hours operating on the night before, was coding. Now in medicine, this was an emergency. Thankfully, all that was left to do on the patient he was currently operating on was to close up. It was a successful mastectomy. My chief ran out of the theater and left his assistant surgeon to close up. Naturally, I followed. I was the least in the hierarchy, so that was my job, to follow my consultant. Anyways, I think I sort of regret it. Maybe I should have stayed back in the theater. Maybe then I would not have had to spend the next few days in a daze. We ran in a beeline to the ICU, and there he was, strapped to several machines, fighting for his life. I stood there in the midst of at least 5 ICU doctors, my consultant, and 3 ICU nurses. I watched as they pounded heavily on his chest. CPR, that's what it's called. Anyways, the environment around me grew quiet. My head started to spin. I could hear voices, but they were muffled. I felt my legs trembling. The air in my lungs felt like carbon monoxide. I think this is what passing out felt like. My chest squeezed tightly. I remember using my right fist to pound it open. I didn't pass out. Someone was tugging fiercely at my scrubs. I turned my head slowly and my gaze fell upon his face. It was the patient's best friend. He was a good-looking man, friendly actually, but now he had horror written on his face. Tears streamed from his already bulging red eyes. It was obvious he had cried all through the night. My heart broke into a million tiny pieces. It was then I knew I was not going to be fine. I had to get out of there fast. I knew what was coming. I fled. I ran till my heels touched the back of my head. I knew I couldn't be there. I couldn't watch them break. I couldn't watch them wail and cry about the death of their beloved brother. On the way out, I glanced briefly at the patient's lover. She didn't get to say goodbye because the anesthesiologist was in a hurry and didn't let her tell her man that she loved him. My heart broke even more. I remember bed 12. He was 25, bright-eyed, handsome if you will, built like a bodybuilder. He had come in the night before, screaming in pain. I remember walking casually to the ER to see a few patients when his consult came in. As is required, I saw the patient, took a detailed history and informed my chief. During the course of his history taking, I remember laughing a lot. He had the strongest support system. His friends, jovial fellows, cracked me up so much. They gave me several compliments. I knew immediately bed 12 would become one of my favorite patients. In all those jokes, you could see the worry lines crisscrossing his face. He held onto my hands and begged me to save him, to tell him that he was going to be okay. I remember saying a prayer in my heart. I held those hands and assured him and his friends, "You will be fine, I promise." I ran around a lot that night. My knee ached, but I kept going because I made a promise. A promise. What gave me the right to even say that? As I ran, I remember the tears threatening to fall if I didn't find solace immediately. Nature tried to cover me because it started to rain. I didn't find shelter. I walked home in the rain. I remember voices in my head echoing. He was 25. My lips began to move. He was only 25. He was only 25. He didn't deserve to die. He didn't. I kept repeating those words as I walked home in the rain. If anyone had seen me, they would have thought I was mad. Why is a girl in pink scrubs soaking wet under the rain and muttering words to herself? The loud noise of heavy winds tugging at the roof and the heavy rain beating fiercely against the window pane tried their best to shield my wailing. I remember falling in and out of sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw bed 12's eyes pleading that he didn't want to die. I cried till my eyes were red and swollen. My nose had never run as much as it did that night. Bed 12. He died from widespread sepsis. He had contracted a flesh-eating bacteria from getting his appendix removed in a quack hospital. Bed 12. My first introduction to how fickle life was. It was 6:15 a.m. Cocks were already crowing, screaming actually. Time to get out of bed and go to work. My bones had never felt heavier. I still carry the pain in my heart. It is etched somewhere, only rearing its head when called upon. In the silence that follows me around, I am made aware of how chaotic my environment actually was. Another patient is calling for me. I run along. Bed 12. Oh, there's someone else there now. Ozioma Ruth Nweke is a writer who resides in Enugu State. She is a medical doctor and volunteer. You can read more of her work on the Kalahari Review, Ebo Quills, and Ekonke. Connect with Ozioma on Instagram at _doctor.ozi. and on X at Nweke Ozioma1. Details and links will be in the episode description. If you've got a story you would like to be featured on this podcast, or a published book you want to make into an audiobook, I would love to hear from you. send an email to info@osadumebi.com or send me a message at Osadumebi on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or X. I look forward to collaborating with you. And if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with that one person you know will enjoy listening. Tell them that stories are a good escape for a few minutes each week.